So what does any YouTube idiot do? Well, you show off your material possessions, right? Why not? Um, so hopefully the dual camera system will work here, and I'll show you a copy of And the Sky Turns to Black. The Dark Age has come from Headhunter D.C. And, well, I'll get into it a little bit, but you can get it off their Crypts of Eternity's Bandcamp. I think you should go to their Big Cartel. Probably better overall shipping from Peru. Uh, let's see. There we go. Now, yeah, this is one of those things where, like, of course I'm gonna buy it, and that would make sense if you kind of grew into death metal around the same time I did, which was, you might have discovered it in the early 90s, but it really hit you in the late 90s, and the early 2000s were sort of where things started to really change in an interesting way for people who were looking for something more than what you'd already heard. And brutal death metal was definitely much more popular. You know, we'd had Formulas Failed to the Flesh, and so Deicide had kind of become a goofy parody after 1995. So where was death metal going to go? It was more underground. So still plenty of classic releases every year. You got to remember, like, Nile was very popular from like 1998 to 2005, and all that. But Krisiun, I think a lot of people forget just what influential phenomenon Krisiun was, and that meant a lot more eyes were on Brazilian death metal. And if you know, that's where I remember a group like this. Um, Basically because I heard the first Krisiun album, and then I heard the second one. Well, it was all right, you know, and then the third and the fourth and all that. Those were a little bit more exciting. So, you know, always a quality sort of product from this label. Um, there's quite a few extras for this one. There's, I think, there's a full zine in here, kind of a sticker. Now I paid for this. This is not a promoted thing. So, poster, which, you know, I'm not huge on posters all the time, but I think it's pretty cool. And anyway, Headhunter D.C. were one of those bands where you knew them if you were lucky, and that's if you went back in time and looked at everything that Cogumelo had released, and gets the light a little bit, in the early '90s and the '80s, and saw where death metal started for Brazil. I think that's the important thing, is to really know why death metal, and like why a band like Krisiun existed, and why Sepultura, you know, where Sepultura came from. It really did benefit to go look at Cogumelo's discography, and this would have been one of the gems. Not this album yet. Actually, they put out two albums, maybe a demo in the late '80s. I think there was I think Punishment at Dawn was '93, and then there was, I think, a '91 or an '88 record before that. And you know, there's bands like Corsis and all manner of groups. Dorsal Atlantica. A lot of bands that went from thrash to death metal. These guys were kind of along that line to start. But the year 2000 brought more brutality. You know, Brazil saw that, like, hey, how about you hit the drums like this? And in a way, these guys were very old school. So the way they did it wasn't that different from the way like a Vader approached it. It was kind of cool. And or Mortem, Peru, that was another one, where this is a 20-page zine that they've included, and I guess the liner notes all come from Sergio, the vocalist. along with lyrics. Yeah, these are all lyrics. So it's just pretty, you know, they've done a pretty good job. Uh, you know, the Dwell Records contract for for the first issue. That's like it's a crazy inclusion for me. It's just cool to see, like the like Dwell Records. Most people would know them from tribute records they put out. It's a Los Angeles label that was very short-lived, and a lot of people like weren't happy with the way some of their releases turned out. But it's kind of a cult LA label thing. They found reviews for the album from zines and magazines all over the country. And then, yeah, the notes are pretty extensive, along with lyric sheets, the original ones, and show flyers. Uh, for me, if you're going to document history from the year 2000, and it needs, you know, there's certain ways you can justify it being a classic or an important release. And to me, I think they've done a good job of packaging this to where like you get the precedence for it. You get that this is a cool record, and that you know, I wish they would put out the rest of the discography. I think it's one of those bands where you, like Embalmed Souls is another one where they've been around since the 80s, and maybe they've never put out like an actual record, but they put out a ton of demos and all that. And it's sort of the definition of a cult death metal release. And on this one, you I think this isn't the one. I think one of their next few records, they cover like Morbid Visions on it, and you always get the roots of it with these guys. And this was one of those records where um, you really saw the continuity between thrash and death metal. You saw, uh, you know, the same way you would see it in like a Mystifier record or something like that. But obviously, this is very much like a more brutal death metal type group at this point. So I'd encourage people to just explore their discography head on. I think this is just one of the cooler bands that you'll find from the Brazilian underground that people just never talk about, and or they never did before the internet decided that everything was important, you know. So yeah, I just thought I'd take a look at that, and that's pretty much it.